Welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston. I'm excited to talk about good news that MDOT received this week from the federal government, a grant that was hanging in limbo to help with a pilot program for wildlife crossings, something to help kind of identify hot spots where wildlife crashes happen and create a danger both to the animals and to the human drivers. We received word just this week that that grant is moving forward for $467,000. So I spoke again with Amanda Novak, who is a resource specialist in MDOT's Bay region, and she worked on this grant in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources. And she talks about the various species that would be studied and would ultimately be protected if this pilot is successful and we can go forward with a project and some safer crossings. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. So Amanda Novak, making a repeat appearance on the podcast. Thank you for making time today and congratulations. Can you talk again about this grant and what it will do?
Sure. Thanks for having me back. We were excited to hear today that our wildlife crossing grant will be moving forward. So we're working through the grant agreement process right now. So it's a little ways out from something that we're going to be putting out to bid. But this is a planning grant. And so we're going to focus on some of our highlighted species, which we've talked about in the previous podcast, and look at where the top hotspot locations are across the state, where we're having a lot of wildlife vehicle collisions with these species. And I think you included in the previous podcast that list of species, which we could include again.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that? Because I think we all think obviously about deer, but there's much deeper pool than that.
Yes, we are going to be looking at white-tailed deer across the state. There's one location we'll be looking at elk crossings. In the UP, a location we'll be studying where the moose are crossing. Also focusing on black bear and wild turkeys. And the pine marten, which I know we got into a little bit in the last podcast about that one too. And then
I have to admit, I forgot about the pine marten though, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yes. So that's exciting for the larger species. I guess the pine marten falls in kind of that smaller species that doesn't have as the impact with wildlife vehicle collisions on motorist safety, but motorist crashes with these or collisions with these animals affects their population sizes. So that's the pine marten, the massasauga rattlesnake, and the Blanding's turtle specifically.
Yeah, I think that the rattlesnake is probably the least known of those species that you mentioned, that a lot of people in Michigan don't know that there is a native venomous snake.
Yes, very small population size at this point, a threatened species, and they are very hard to find. They are not an aggressive poisonous snake, very hidden, and they don't strike unless they're incredibly scared or cornered. So they have a variety of benefits, and MDOT does do a lot of things with our projects to mitigate for them and protect them.
Yeah, I know that was a big part of the prep for an I-75 rebuild in Monroe County, down near Lake Erie and near the border, that the snakes were part of that mitigation effort there, and I'm sure other parts of the state. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned them being a threatened species. Could you talk about the various classifications for that?
Sure. Yeah, the threatened species are more, I guess, if you will, highly protected. But we basically treat all of those classifications the same. So some of the other ones fall under the special concern category. But in a lot of cases, we mitigate for those anyway, the same way.
I was thinking, I don't know if you saw it or not, but we're talking about the various species and about the black bear making their way further downstate. Did you see just this week in the news, there were maps of a few years ago and, where black bear were most common in the state. And it shows that the map now, how they've made their way into more counties toward the south. So I think that this probably comes at a good time for that.
Yes, it definitely does. We did include the distribution map changes from 2011 to 2021, and it's pretty dramatic how they've dispersed over time.
Yeah. And if they were going south to north, I would think that's because their habitat's being encroached on by development, but that's not necessarily the case if they're moving north to south, right?
I think it still is a little bit related to development and the way humans are, moving across the landscape, how we spread out over time as well. I think we do encroach on their habitats.
Yeah, obviously there's development up north too. I guess I just think
right.
there's more sprawl and development in the cities, the population centers in the southern part of the state. Talk about the timeline. Obviously you're just finding out that this is moving forward after kind of, as I mentioned, being in limbo for a while. But what do you feel like the timeline is for movement on your project?
Once we get the grant agreement in place, then I'll move through our typical contracting mechanisms, which, can be somewhat lengthy depending on the dollar values and things like that. So I don't want to speak too soon, but I would hope that we could get an RFP out, sometime by the end of the year.
Yeah, that's not terrible knowing how these things work.
Yes, it's complicated as you move through, and then we still have to put the RFP together with DNR, and so we want to make sure everything needed by both agencies is represented.
You see some of the misinformed comments and the knee-jerk skepticism to these kinds of things, and you might hear it yourself in your own life from family or friends. So what do you say when people kind of scoff at the notion that we need to study how to allow for safer crossings?
I would say overall, I do get some folks that don't agree with the approach, but overall it's pretty well received. My family gets pretty excited. My family's from the Gaylord area, so seeing these larger animals is very normal. And deer car crashes, almost everybody in the public has been impacted by that at some point. But I think it's incredibly important to think about their populations and connecting their populations, as well as protecting motorist safety and recognizing that those two things go hand in hand.
That's great. Well, I think your family's doing a good job of staying off the MDOT Facebook page then.
That is true, yes.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Know before you go. Check out my drive at www.michigan.gov/drive on your desktop or mobile device before you hit the road. Get the latest traffic, construction, and lane closure information for Michigan roads. Bookmark or create a link on your home screen so you can plan your route accordingly and avoid lengthy delays. That's my drive at www.michigan.gov/drive.
Well, okay, then as you talked about the timeline and the planning, and what's your blue sky, most fervent hope for how this goes and where we're at, 5 or 10 years from now?
My hope is that we look at all MDOT corridors and figure out how to manage them for all species, not looking at just these larger species where we have all the wildlife vehicle collisions, or maybe we use that as a starting point, but then we mitigate for everything we can in those locations and manage all our corridors in some fashion. Recognizing it'll be very difficult on M routes, that's something I can't quite picture, but we'll work through it.
Yeah, well, you remember that I talked to someone from the what's called the Yellowstone to Yukon initiative, where they've done some really creative things, both in the United States and in Western Canada, and it's been successful. They have metrics that show that it's working. So I think that one of the things I would say to the people who are at least skeptical about this is that it can work, and the animals tend to figure it out over time.
Yes, they do. And I actually was talking with Parks Canada recently to try to get some of their design information. And they did let me know that we will see a decrease in wildlife vehicle collisions over time. It can be documented and proven, especially since they've been doing this for so long. So that was encouraging to hear.
And we talked before, but I think it's worth repeating that, again, people think the turtles, how could that turtle crossings present a danger? But we have places in the state, and I've seen it myself, where a turtle is crossing slowly, as a turtle does, and drivers come along and they're concerned and they want to help, which is great, but it presents its own danger. So this is one of the things that you would hope to mitigate with better turtle crossings, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And some of the turtles are not small. We talked in the last podcast about them being wash tub size. I mean, that's a dramatic crash. And then, yeah, like you said, when we have a lot of turtles crossing, for example, in the one location on US 127 in Gratiot County, we had folks just pulling over and trying to move them in live traffic just constantly. So,
yeah, it's both the danger of pulling over on the shoulder where people are going pretty fast and then actually running into the travel lane to move the turtles. I mean, good intentions, but my goodness.
Yes, very dangerous.
Yeah. Well, so what have we learned over the years? As you know, there was some silly controversy when one lawmaker in particular really demagogued the issue several years ago about turtle fences near Grand Haven. But do you know what we've learned in terms of design or technology to make them more effective?
Yes, we're going to be utilizing a different type of fencing where we're going to drive some lightweight sheeting adjacent to the roadway. So it's going to go in quicker, hopefully be a little more cost effective. But also I have learned from researching turtle activity or behaviors is that when they can see through the other side of the fence, they will often pace, they can climb the fence, they'll try endlessly to figure out a way to get over it, which can cause them to be exhausted or stressed. So this hopefully will eliminate that behavior as well.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for that too, because I really like turtles.
Yes.
So anything else? We talked about the pine marten and the rattlesnakes and the bears. I guess wild turkey or pheasants, are they part of this too?
Wild turkey are, yes. Those are not that fun to hit either.
No, they can get pretty big.
Yes, they are pretty big. They can do a lot of damage to your vehicle. But yes, they are included. We do have records of where those crashes happen. Often folks file police reports for those too, for their insurance claims. So they will be included. Pheasants are not currently included, but as a disclaimer of how this might work, we will leave it up to hopefully our research team whenever we get someone on board to determine if there are other species that we should include. So this is not an all-inclusive list necessarily.
When you think of the turkeys, and you often see them in flocks, obviously, by the side of the road or crossing, what would there be something different for them as opposed to the mammals that we're talking about?
I don't think so. I think the exclusionary fence would work for them. Just keeping them from walking towards the roadside would be pretty helpful. They could fly over it, I guess, but they would probably be less likely to do that than walking up right to the road shoulder and flying out in front of live traffic. That's the hope.
That's the hope, right? Well, because it is Earth Week. We've talked about this before, but I want to take a chance to highlight some of the other things that you and others have done around the state with, sunflowers and other plantings that aren't just for aesthetics. They serve a real environmental purpose in terms of pollinators and helping the bees, which we should be doing all we can to support. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, we have since so Bay Region started their sunflower planting program in 2016. Now we are planting, I think, in every region, excluding, I don't think the UP is participating, but everybody else is participating in some way, which is really exciting to see. We are experimenting with some new plantings this year. So we will be planting our sunflowers, adjusting some of those locations, the DOT showstopper, which we talked about previously, and then we'll be planting zinnias in various colors as well this year.
And what are they known to draw? Is there a particular bee or another species that really like zinnias?
Not that I know of. I think we just picked them. We were trying to pick things that would be visible from the roadway, especially when you're traveling at high speeds. That was more of our focus. But also, all of these function as pollinator species. So,
yeah, no, that makes sense. What else is on the horizon on that front? Anything? I mean, you talked about that obviously as a newer species to be planting, but are there other new things we can look forward to?
No, we're just going to be planting a couple of different varieties of sunflowers that we didn't plant in the past. Just trying out some new varieties, wondering if they'll do better in the right of way. Every year we fight the weather conditions and the site conditions based on rainfall or severe drought. So we're always looking for new species that will survive a little better.
Okay. If you don't know the answer to this, that's fine. But yeah. Do you know all the places in the state where we've done sunflowers?
Not outside my region. I'm not as familiar with those.
I guess I don't know. Is the soil a concern? You guys have to figure out, you and the other resource specialists figure out where they'll do especially well?
Yeah, the soil is always a concern. Surprisingly, sunflowers can grow pretty much anywhere. It's just we have found that after repeat planting in the same location, they just don't do as well. So we're going to try to kind of rotate them out. So this year there may be wildflowers where there were sunflowers previously, just to kind of give those plots a break.
That makes sense. So just like, soybeans or corn or wheat, you got to rotate your crops, right?
Yes. And that is being managed actually out of TSMO, or the Traffic Maintenance and Operations
Traffic
area.
Safety and Maintenance Operations.
Maintenance operations.
Yeah, I always stumble on that one too. It's an acronym without a vowel. I mean, it has a vowel at the end, but it feels like you should have a vowel earlier in
it does.
The word. Well, what else do you want to mention, Amanda? You're probably pretty excited today about that grant. Is there anything else you want to add?
I am excited. I look forward to partnering with DNR on this and really getting into the details and hopefully getting an RFP out as soon as we can.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thank you for coming on to talk about this again on short notice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
I'd like to thank you once more for tuning in to Talking Michigan Transportation. You can find show notes and more on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout. I also want to acknowledge the talented people who help make this a reality each week, starting with Randy Debler, who skillfully edits the audio, Jesse Ball, who proofs the content, Courtney Bates, who posts the podcast to various platforms, and Jackie Salinas, who transcribes the audio to make it accessible to all.